So let's take it just a little deeper. We'll go into race. So we take it from culture relevant, we just dive right into race. So, you did a great job kind of framing the need for diversity within the profession, as far as, HEP programs and taking that into the K-12 level. But, in saying that, then, we hit on just race in general. So how do we talk about race in physical education?
I mean, directly. Like I guess I don't see a need to tiptoe around it. There's a lot of times where, I think the more we resist not talking about it, the worse it gets, right? And there's, though there's ways you have to address the conversation or approach the conversation, but sometimes there's times where you need to talk about what's happening in our society after a shooting or after something's happened or even a movement. Even teachers taking the time to having a conversation with students what's going or explaining them what's going on, right? And even having those and bridging those conversations about race, right? I've even had reflecting back to my middle school teachers especially, I can remember them kind of doing like a self like bio saying this is who I am, this is what I know, this is what I don't know. But what, and we would do like these identity kind of tracker things, right? We'll talk about our identity, who we are. But I think the biggest thing is just talk about it. And it's uncomfortable. However, the more you don't talk about it, the worse these things become. You can't ignore it. And race is very salient in our society. Race is a big identifier for us all. But I think also a lot of times, in peak programs, students aren't really trained or even immersed in talking about race, right? And what does that mean to talk about race? People ask me off the wall questions about race all the time. I'm not offended by it because I have the language for it, right? We think about what Beverly Tatum says about race, and a lot of times people just don't have the language for it. So the best way to talk about it is just be open about what you don't know and what you do know, and just have open dialogue. And for young students, that may be tough. One thing that I've done with students is perhaps using open-ended journal prompts to talk about stuff, to talk about maybe how they identify, or talk about maybe what they understand, what's going on in broader society, or even critical incidences that happen in class, right? If you're playing a game, there was a game that was a modified game that was uneven, you may ask a prompt of, well, how does this uneven game reflect some issues in our larger society? Or how, if you could change the inequity in this game, how would you change that inequity? What changes would you make? And a lot of times there's a small conversation that need to happen because race is not going to ever leave us, right? As long as we're going to be people on earth, race is going to be here. So I suggest directly talking about it.
And you kind of alluded to it there, like these things, yes, they impact students, but these topics around race are happening in communities. So if students are getting that information, sometimes it's up to us as educators, doesn't matter what content area we are, to kind of, support them in that conversation. Because if they're asking, they're curious, right? They want to know these things. And, it's on us to do our best to support it with the knowledge that we have. And speaking to a note that got passed to me here, the third tenet of Gloria Ladson Billings' work, Critical Consciousness. Tell us, kind of around the conversation that we're having, tell us a little bit about that, of what you know in that space.
I think, that level, consciousness takes a while, right? And there's, I believe, not to intentionally name drop, but I think Bell Hook, not I think, I know Bell Hooks talks about this a lot. You can only love to your level of consciousness. You only can be critical to your level of consciousness, right? And even for Pete teachers, educators, across whatever, content area, increasing your consciousness, increasing what you know about the broader society is helpful, right? So in and of that place, when you have to be critical or even teach being critical, there's ways in which you have to have context to do that, right? There's times that we see things and in our minds we're making a critique, but it's actually a judgment statement, right? How do we actually be critical about, what's going on in Ukraine, what's going on with Russia, right? If we understood the context with, the USSR, the Cold War, now we can actually have a critical dialogue about what we're seeing, as opposed to saying, oh, that side is doing that, this side is doing that, and that's not critical, right? That's a lazy argument. And so to that last tenet, that's probably, in my opinion, one of the most difficult tenets because, as I mentioned before, that takes a lot of self work. It takes a lot of self reflection. It takes a lot of, even self study of understanding one, the environment you're in, but also providing critiques and providing a level of insight that is not necessarily damaging, but also impactful, right? And I've been fortunate to be around people who are extremely critically conscious, right? And they've told me things about myself like, man, I really didn't see that, or even tell me that you bring this to the table, and I would never saw that if they didn't position it in a way that was critical and not make me feel judged or feel like I was being judged. So to me, and for kind of to answer that last question, is that's something we have to teach. We have to teach critical thinking. We have to teach critical consciousness. But more importantly, before we teach that, we have to have a good base of what we know and what we don't know. Right? You just can't teach what you don't know. Right? You can't teach. You can't be conscious about something that you don't believe in. Right? You have to see the students that you're working with as human. So if you don't see them as human first, anything else you put into it doesn't matter. You have to first see them as human. If you're not seeing them as human beings, you can be as critically conscious as you want to be. You can have every, instant activity you want, every strategy you want, but if you're not looking at them as human beings who actually have, they're not coming to you as a blank slate. They're actually coming to you with lived experiences that have nuance, that have a culture, right? That's one thing I love about living in Springfield. I'm being introduced to Caribbean culture. I'm being introduced to Afro-Latino culture. And so now I'm seeing the nuances in culture just because I immerse myself in that space. But more importantly, I see them as human, right? I see young men who may look like me that may not be an African American. He might be Dominicano. He might be um, Haitian, but I still see a little black boy. I still see the human in it, right? And I think that's the biggest thing. If you're not seeing somebody as a human, a lot of this other stuff is for naught. And that's what we're seeing a lot of times. Not everyone, but a lot of times that we're seeing people come in, get their check, leave, roll out the ball, maybe not figuratively or literally, they may figuratively roll out the ball. They may, I've had cringy conversation with, in-service teachers saying, oh, what does it matter? These kids will never play whatever, they don't come to school, they don't care about school. And that in of itself, you're not even viewing them as a whole person, in my opinion. Some others may say otherwise, but for me, before we reach that critical consciousness, we have to take a step back and see who we're working for as human, right? Even as a man of color working in a predominantly white space, I still have to see my students as human. Though I may not identify with them through race or lived experiences, however, I have been a student. I have been in a position where I wanted to learn something. I have been in a position where I wasn't where I was supposed to be, right? And so that humanity in that's where I can meet them now. I was like, you know what? I've been there before. So let me meet you where you are and help you where we gotta go. And that's that level, at least for me, my level of critical consciousness that I bring to every space I go into. So
Ah,
that's it.
man, that's what we said all through the conversation. Putting this together. That's a good way to just kind of say, put the bow in it right there. Is at the end of the day, it's just about being human, right? And seeing humanity in people. So I appreciate Dr. Wood. Before I let you sign off, though, there's one uh, in the pre-record. There was a good little topic about your background that came up that I want you to just kind of tell the listeners about, and I'll address it as the talented 10. Is that correct?
That's fine. So
Tell
yeah,
us about that.
so even before I get there, I'll take even a step back. I'll give you some bonus footage. Okay. I am a product of the Ronald E. McNair Scholars Program. And we talked about recruitment of students of color. My initial recruitment to academia was through the McNair Scholars Program. So Ronald McNair was a part of, I believe, the '86 Challenger. He's one of the first African Americans to, I guess, first African American males to be a pilot. He's originally from South Carolina, was educated at MIT, graduated at MIT, and had an initiative. He wanted to get more students of color in professional schools. So he started an initiative, got kids rolling in that. And so I was an initial product of that. And so through that program, I started to understand what graduate school is about, got some tools to navigate, stumbled upon a graduate program, but then I met my advisor and still mentor now, Jared Russell, at a SHAPE convention, I believe back in 2011. So it was my first year as a graduate student. We're in San Diego, and I met him doing the poster presentation, and he handed me his card. And just like any, bright-eyed, bushy-tailed graduate student, as soon as I got back to campus, I emailed him, I sent him my CV, and every semester I would just send him an update about how I was doing. So as it was getting closer to the time that I was going to graduate, he picked the phone and gave me a call. And anyone who knows Dr. Russell is a very extremely calm human being. Picks up the phone, is like, "Hey, Corey, this is Jared Russell, and I want to offer you an opportunity to come to Auburn. I have a vision of graduating students from this program, specifically African American students who either come from an HBCU or students of color who are looking to pursue a PhD, and we would love to have you here at Auburn in our summer bridge program." And so, kind of his goal was to graduate at least 10 students in 10 years. I believe he's definitely exceeded that number. But for me, that program was my first acculturation and socialization into the professorate, but also understanding what Pete was, what physical education was beyond the classroom. What does it mean to be a PE scholar, right? When I tell people that, I'm a professor, they just think I just professionally roll balls. I'm like, no, I research, I talk about this in a scholarly way. And so for me, being in that program, it put me around persons like Peter Hasty, Mary Rudisil, gave me opportunities to work with like Linda Griffin, Judy Rink, and Paul Ward, Philip Ward, and Hans van der Mars, and just put me in a really good space to be somewhere where, if I, in my wildest imagination, I could never dream up to be in those spaces. But for me, that bridge program and even my colleague has put us in positions where, we never thought, not even 10 years ago, 5 years ago, I never thought I'd be sitting here talking to you at all. I never thought I would be doing the things that I'm doing today. But through that program, among other programs, but specifically the Summer Bridge program at Auburn, really set the tone for my professional career. And I'm looking to, keep that vision alive and, be a mentor, be a guiding light for a student of color, and or just any student who wants to, be the best they can be in this profession or any profession within kinesiology. I'm a public servant, and I do this not for rewards, but I'm fulfilled through this, right? I do this because it's something I love to do. I'm good at it, at least I like to think so, and it's been beneficial. It's given me more than I could ever give it. So yeah, so that's about it.
Ladies and gentlemen, fellow humans and listening audience, there you have it, Dr. Korey Boyd. Dr. Boyd, we appreciate you being on. How can our audience follow you? Any social media, Twitter, Facebook, whatever?
Yes, I have a Twitter. I believe it's Korey_Boyd PhD. And email, you can find me just about on our website, or if not, we can just drop the below or wherever it's going to appear, so we can drop my email address somewhere or even my Twitter handle somewhere. But I'm easily accessible, so just reach out, any question, and I'm more than willing to help you and assist you with your future journey.
And there you have it. Once again, Dr. Korey Boyd from Springfield College, Assistant Professor of Physical Education. Appreciate having you on. And thank you all for listening and tuning back in to the Shape America podcast, series 2 of the EDI sessions. Thanks again, and everybody take care.